Hey everybody, thanks for listening. You are listening to the second episode of Stepping from Stone to Stone, a podcast exploring combat Silat, also known as Penjak Silat Pertempuran, and the underlying strategies, attributes, and principles behind all combat. I'm your host, the self-described regular guy, Aaron Chappell, and with me is Guru Sean Stark, founder and creator of Combat Silat, and all-around monotone speaker and sometimes nice guy. Hey Guru, how you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How you doing?
Oh, it's been a hectic day, but I'm glad we finally got on to episode 2. So,
yeah, it only took us 4 tries?
I think 4 is a good number. We can just stop pulling at that thread now and not think about how many actual tries went into that. So last time we talked, we kind of put a pin in everything right when we were getting ready to start talking about organization and reductionism, and through those maybe touching a little bit on the idea of adaptability. To me, those are some of the things that really set PSP apart, or it might even be more accurate to say I find them common in most of the martial arts that I've seen or studied that are actually combative and that you can apply under pressure.
Sure.
So to get started, reductionism, it's a little bit odd to see a martial art actually get smaller as time goes on, or have the number of emphasis that are really pushed forward shrink. Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the goal has always been sort of, this combination of combat effectiveness and because of combat effectiveness being one of the primary things, it automatically leads to this understanding that you meaning you and me meaning me only have so much time in the freaking day. And so I want to reduce to make it attainable and doable for the majority of people out there, because by reducing it to its essence, I'm also allowing people then to get more time in redundant training and stretching those redundancies to fit, abstract situations. So because that's what fighting is, right? It's all basically abstract situations. And so, PSP is the purpose is to create something combative, right? So there's only, as far as I know, 2 ways to do that. One is to create something that tries to answer every conceivable abstract situation, and the other is to reduce to the sort of most generalized kinds of bits and pieces that will be able to adapt to those situations. And so the latter is kind of the approach that I've taken, because I also feel like it gives you and me and everybody involved more opportunity to really grow in depth of understanding. And since you can reduce that way, you can also start to see how easy it is to answer a lot of things that just don't require 52 different versions. So when you get to a place where you're single, Garak or Sikap Pasang answers 25% or something of combat, well then you only need 4 things, and you just got to find the 4 things that you need. And so that's kind of the approach. Ease of learning and for ease of learning and speed of learning, and it suits my mentality of adaptability. So
we start looking to really build recognition in a practitioner early on, and then by kind of boiling everything down to its most base element, build adaptability in practitioners early on. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the start, we have some really, fundamental, simple, I guess, drills that we use. But once you get past the fundamentals, you are immediately adapting them because that was exciting. Because they're simple, right? And because they're not so specific of an answer that you can basically begin adapting them almost immediately once you understand how to do that.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me to see. I think we might have mentioned it in one of the iterations of the first episode. I don't know if it was the one that made it the final cut, but yeah. I've been around for more or less probably about 3 incarnations of PSP. Right. At this point, it seems like the art just shrinks a little bit. It shrinks a little bit. It gets more violent, and shrinks a little bit more, and then more violence.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think the reason is because as I continue to grow in, even within the fundamental bits that we've had the fundamental bits all along, right? Like, none of those have really gone away. They've been there, and they'll still be there because I find them to be more robust than I ever imagined them to be initially, right? Because I had all that other cloudiness from all the other arts that I'd studied still kind of resonating in my head, like, oh, I have to answer this, and I have to answer that, and I have to answer this, and sort of, still picking through that even today. And I imagine in 10 years I'll still be, in those same situations, I guess.
Oh, and before I forget, maybe an aside for people who don't have a familiarity with our system, or who are picking this up for the first time, or who don't speak Bahasa, what are Sikap Pasang and Garak?
Oh, yeah.
And English, the language that we're speaking in now.
Oh, so picky. Sikap Pasang is essentially welcoming postures, and for the most part, they're used as baiting techniques to bait an attack. That is not exclusively true, but that's generally how they're perceived. And then our Sikap Pasang directly use Garak, and Garak basically just means movement. So when you say Garakan, it's a specific movement. So if you hear those terms, that's what I'm referring to, but Garak is usually what I refer to generally as our specific movements. But so they're sort of like meta movements. You could think of them like very miniature forms or something. I don't know, but they're not quite that extensive.
And they're also, we don't really view them as static stances, or at least the way I've seen them applied.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I don't really use stances. We have Kuda Kuda, which is a horse stance, basically, but we don't train it like most people are familiar with. We only apply it, we don't train it, if that makes sense.
Well, it's the difference between hours and hours spent in horse stance doing some sort of movement set, and I think the most recent time that we had Kuda Kuda show up in the Brandon training group down here was doing neck breaks and needing a nice table to put our opponent or victim, or however you want to call it, on.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of the same with, I don't teach blocks because to me, blocking is an issue of timing and all that. And so I don't teach blocks. I don't teach stances. I would rather teach people how to move, because most people need to move with balance and fluidity more than they need to learn how to stand there. Stability comes by practice, but it's usually practice in motion, right? Because I've never seen a fight where people just stand around. So
usually the guy that's still is having something bad happen to him.
Yeah, he's dead.
Or about to be.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that was an interesting point that you brought up, and it kind of touches on a few interesting points in my martial journey. I started out in PSP, or came to PSP after studying a few other things early on in life, and then I kind of went over into the combative side, and they would talk about reference points or non-diagnostic flinch responses.
Yeah.
Basically, it was a touchstone that you could get back to when you didn't know what the hell was going on, but somebody was raining hate down on your head. So, that's kind of how I've seen Sikapasong and some of the other
Alis,
used. Yeah,
Alis, which is evasion in English. Our evasions are set up, to me, as flinch responses, and to some extent even our entries. For example, at 3 and 4 for us, people are like, oh, I would never turn my back to somebody. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously, right? That's not the preferred method, but should somebody come from behind, you still have to know what the hell is going on. You still have that relationship. So, to me, that's 3 and 4 in a nutshell, right? Like, you don't always volunteer for the best position. Sometimes you're in it and you got to figure out what to do. And so the same with our evasions, right? It's really duck, dodge, fade, and withdraw your stomach. And if somebody's hitting you in the back, how do you arch your back? Those are kind of all of the evasion methods. And then we're tying that all together with our footwork, tying that all together with our meta movements, and it creates a system of use.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned 3 and 4 and people not liking them or not wanting to use them. I tend to find 3 and 4 to be some of the most useful ones. I have a roommate, and we have a relationship a lot like Inspector Clouseau and his butler Cato.
Yeah.
So that's he's not looking to attack me or screw with me when I'm facing him.
That's right.
He's waiting till I'm like pulling laundry out or coming out of the shower or whatever, and then the fun is on, and it's like, okay, well, I need to figure something out now. But even in scenario-based training, it seems to be rare that people wait for you to put your dukes up, get in your nice boxer's cage or whatever, and fight. They're looking to like, hey, look over there, and then they hit you with a hammer.
Yeah. Well, and in the case of 3, for example, and when I refer to these numbers, for those who aren't familiar with the system, basically I have 8, I would say 4 Sikapasong welcoming postures that lead to 4 different meta movements, which lead to 4 different Alis and entries, etc., etc., and they can be duplicated from inside of the arm or outside of the arm or inside of the leg and outside of the leg. So we end up with an 8 total numbering system for some of these relationships. We actually have 12 total, but the versions referencing odd numbers are on the outside of the opponent's arm and even numbers are on the inside. So anyway, that's a whole lot to try to take in, but 3 to me is like somebody standing alongside of you and starts screwing with you. And 4 is when somebody comes alongside, right behind you and starts screwing with you. And so, to me, that's how I look at them. Even though we don't strictly apply that way, in training, it still gives you the tools. And that's where that adaptability and that sort of stretching of these simple movements can just continue to unfold because you don't have to prescribe every damn situation that occurs. What needs to happen is you need to have enough mental acuity and depth of understanding to adapt what you know to what's fucking happening, because every time you turn around there's going to be a different tweak on a situation, and if you can't do that, if you can't adapt simple things to a situation, how are you going to adapt complex things to complex situations? It's not going to happen.
So it just goes right back again to recognition and adaptability.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's almost like it's a system, and it's just fun when everybody back to the same thing. So, and I think it'd be interesting to speak a little bit to the set points and the referencing system. You mentioned the numbers a little bit, and that kind of touches on the combat positioning system that we have in PSP, which is a function of the way it's organized. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I feel like, combatively, what generally is missing is people develop these techniques and these methods, but they don't internalize the relationship between themselves and the opponent. And so what the system kind of does is it forces you to look at that relationship all the time, because you can literally do the same exact motions from inside of an opponent's arm as you can from outside of the opponent's arm, and applying, for example, to the arm or to the body, and come up with uniquely different results because of your specific relationship. And so, it becomes important to pay attention to that. And then, when things go wrong, you're still in some kind of relationship. And so what I try to get people to understand is that all of these things that we're learning are essentially a methodology for recovery as well as they are for application. So things go wrong, you get bumped, moved, twisted, hit, kicked, choked, whatever. You have to figure out first, what's your relationship. Of course, you're not processing all of this, right? You're not sitting there sorting through all this crap, because what should be happening is, because you've already done this a million times, because it's so simple, is that you're just immediately processing and applying counter methods. And that's sort of the set point idea. The idea is, when things go wrong, how do you recover? What do you recover to? Because if you don't recover to something you already know, then all you're doing is continuing to add to the chaos. And if you abandon your training, even if your training isn't as good as you thought it was going to be, and you get whopped, at the end of the day, you're still better to go back to your training if you can, because you literally are just adding more chaos to the situation. So if you don't, and so I'm an advocate for that. Like, you know so well your setup that you can recover to it when things go wrong. You know your movements and your stepping patterns and your positions, and so you're always kind of recovery mode, always application mode, always in adaptability mode. I don't know how else to address it.
Well, no, it makes sense. It's like if you get lost in the woods, the first thing you do is stop becoming more lost and try to remember the last place, your last known point.
And then always push off more with your left leg.
Yeah.
That's a really good tactic.
Yeah. Yeah, just get that circle walking going fairly good.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like finding shooting an azimuth. If you're so inclined, to talk in terms of maps and being lost in the woods, the best way not to get lost in the woods is to start where you're at and point, not literally, but point to a specific thing off in the distance, and that's what you walk to. If you do that continuously, looking back to where you came from, looking forward to where you're going, you can essentially shoot a straight line. And it's kind of that premise, knowing where you came from, knowing where you're going, and knowing where you're going is always going to be based on what your relationship is. So, it all just connects together.
It's interesting. And that's something I think I've seen some sort of reference or touch point for just about every art that had practitioners that were able to apply it under stress. And that sounds like a fairly simple thing. I mean, that's what we're always trying to do in the martial arts.
Yeah.
But it, the devil is in the details.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's simple in theory, and then doing it under stress is a whole other level. And that's where the simplicity of the thing comes in handy, right?
What was that Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, until they hit the first time or whatever it is. Yeah, exactly.
So, looking at that, how do we use those attribute points, or those attribute categories, I should say, recognition, adaptability, a sense of organization, getting the set points, the reference points together. How do we use those to change our art and make it more relevant to what, where we find ourselves in this time and place?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, for example, let's see, I'm trying to come up with a simple enough solution for a podcast. I like to use the Garak as a example for, it's our parries, it's our entry, right? It's our checking, and so on. And because of that, it always sets up kind of the next thing. And so the simplicity of training is critical, I think, because from the start, you're constantly adapting this, welcoming posture. And now you're taking that simple static posture and you're adding movement to it, and then you're adding movement with tweaks and outcome, right? So your movement slightly changes, and that becomes an outcome in itself. And so you're constantly in that adaptation mode right from the start of training. So I think, it's really just having the understanding that that's what's actually happening, right? You can look at them like as techniques if you want, right? But you'll miss the value of the adaptation, because the value is the adaptation. It's not the damn technique. The techniques are, kind of touchstones that help you to know why you should adapt. But they themselves are not necessarily all that important in my mind anyway. It's more important that you know how to move and you have a body culture, and that you can learn to be responsive to relationship, and then more so because you can be responsive, that you learn how to control and take control of the relationship.
I think that's an interesting point. You mentioned body culture, and I don't know that we have time to fully explore that topic today. But in studying different arts, I've seen different body cultures manifest themselves because of the cultural context that the art grew up in. Chinese people tend to move differently than Americans.
Yeah.
Just as a mannerism and the way they hold themselves, gesture, etc.
Sure.
So I think that might be an interesting topic for next episode. If we go into a little bit of what are the differences in Indonesian body culture and American body culture, and then how do we look at the body culture that other groups may have, and how does that inform what we do? If you're up for discussing that, or seeing if we can cram that into 30-ish minutes.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm able to, I'm able to. I mean, I can't speak so much about many other cultures, but I can speak about what I've done to adapt Silat to a body culture in the United States, and our activities and our sense of combative outcomes and things like that.
I think that would have value, because just admitting that there is a difference in body culture, because most of the time when you come into a new art, the first thing that you're made to understand is that this art is the best one and always will be, and it'll fit everything that you ever need. So there's no need to spend your training dollars, and especially your testing dollars, anywhere else.
That's still true with PSP.
Yeah, well, it's only true with PSP, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
That's the marketing stance we have to take. But yeah, I think that would be something interesting to explore.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, all right, folks. Well, we're coming up to about the 30-ish minute mark, and I have a feeling that the next one's probably going to be a little over 30 minutes. So, if you were hoping for an exact half hour, hopefully you'll forgive us being a little short next time, knowing that we're probably going to go a little or a lot over. Or I should say a little short this time, knowing that we're going to go a little or a lot over next time.
Yeah, suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah. Guru, anything you want to say besides the words of gentle encouragement that you're well known for?
No, I'm good.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.